Mot is one of the most enigmatic and fascinating deities in the Canaanite pantheon, representing death, destruction, and the underworld. His name, which means death in the Semitic languages, underscores the very essence of his dominion over mortality and the realm of the dead. Often depicted as a god of decay, Mot played a critical role in the cyclical nature of life and death in Canaanite religious thought, and his mythological stories are steeped in themes of cosmic battles, seasonal cycles, and the balance between life and death. In the ancient Canaanite worldview, Mot was feared and revered for his power over death, yet he was not solely a god of malevolence. Instead, his role was part of a broader cosmic order, one in which death was not seen as an absolute end but as an essential force in the eternal cycle of life. Just as the land would undergo cycles of life and death, from planting to harvest and then back to the barren winter, so too did Mot represent the necessary forces of destruction and regeneration. Death, in this sense, was viewed as a natural part of existence, necessary for the renewal and continuation of life. Mot's most famous myth centers around his conflict with the storm god Baal, the god of fertility, rain, and agricultural abundance. According to the Ugaritic texts, which contain many of the details of Canaanite mythology, the battle between Baal and Mot represents the struggle between life and death, growth and decay. In one of the most well-known myths, Baal descends into the underworld, ruled by Mot, after being defeated in battle. The myth describes how Baal is imprisoned by Mot, who attempts to keep him in the realm of the dead. This period of death and darkness is felt by the earth, which becomes barren, and the crops cease to grow. The people of the earth, unable to produce food, begin to suffer. However, this is not the end of the story. Baal's eventual resurrection is central to Canaanite religious practices, especially in the context of fertility and agriculture. The cycle of death and resurrection mirrors the agricultural cycle, with the death of the land during the dry season and its rebirth with the coming of rain and spring. In some versions of the myth, the goddess Anat, the warrior goddess and sister of Baal, fights Mot to free her brother, thus ensuring his return and the revival of the land. This myth was vital to Canaanite agricultural society, as it explained the seasonal changes and the necessity of both life and death for the fertility of the earth. Mot's role in the mythology is not just one of antagonism but also serves a more philosophical and cosmic purpose. His presence in the mythological cycle underscores the inevitability of death and its role in the greater balance of existence. As the god of death, Mot represents the unavoidable fate that all beings must face, but his defeat by Baal signifies that death is not an eternal force but something that must give way to life in the cyclical rhythm of nature. In addition to his connections with seasonal cycles, Mot's association with the underworld and the afterlife was deeply intertwined with ideas of judgment and the fate of souls. The Canaanites, like many ancient peoples, believed that death was not the final chapter of existence but a transition to another realm. Mot's realm was where souls journeyed after death, though not much is known about the specifics of the Canaanite afterlife. However, some interpretations suggest that Mot's domain was a dark and desolate place, where the dead would dwell until they were either forgotten or reborn into a new cycle of life. Mot's myth also connects him to other deities in the broader Semitic world. In some ways, he can be compared to other death deities, such as the Mesopotamian god Nergal or the Greek god Hades. However, unlike these gods, Mot's mythology is closely tied to the cycles of nature, illustrating how death and rebirth are not separate, opposing forces but part of a larger, unified cycle. This was a central aspect of Canaanite religion, where gods and goddesses were deeply tied to the rhythms of the natural world. Despite his dark and terrifying nature, Mot was not always portrayed as an evil deity. Instead, he was seen as a necessary and inevitable force in the world. His role was essential for the balance of life, and his defeat by Baal signified the triumph of life over death, at least for a time. This cyclical battle reflected the larger cosmic drama of nature and the human condition, where death and destruction are never final but are part of the eternal dance between opposing forces that govern the world. Mot's worship, though less documented than that of Baal or Asherah, would have been central to those living in an agrarian society who understood the importance of both life and death for the prosperity of their crops and the continued existence of their communities. Rituals and sacrifices to Mot may have been intended to appease him or ensure a peaceful transition into the afterlife, reflecting the complex relationship between the living and the dead in Canaanite culture. In summary, Mot is a profound and complex deity whose influence extended beyond death itself. He embodied the necessary destruction that made room for new growth, symbolizing the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. His mythological struggle with Baal reveals the deep connection between Canaanite religious beliefs and the natural world, where death was not an end but an essential part of the ongoing cycle that sustained life. Through his story, Mot reminds us that death, though often feared, is an integral part of existence, leading not only to an eventual end but to renewal and the continuing rhythm of the world.